people that meet at these meetings desperately need a kinetic World War III again on the continent of Europe, which is why the EU should be dismantled, because they do not in any way respect the sovereignty of those nations or the people in those countries. I believe their whole goal is to have another mass destructive war on the soil of Europe. And then, as they did after World War One and World War Two, come out with the solution. So problem, reaction, solution. And the solution is Agenda 2030.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Today, I'm honored to have Mel K, who has a very popular show, and she's also an author as well. So we'll be diving into her book at some point in the episode. And Mel, how you doing? Thanks so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm always excited to speak to people that are fighting for truth and transparency and justice. And I see you are just as committed to that as I am. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's funny is sometimes I question, not seriously at least, but sometimes I think about how the nature of the content that we produce, which is similar, of course, in nature, and how there's so much more of an uphill battle, so to speak, juxtaposing somebody who's producing content that is not remotely controversial or sensitive in nature.
Right. True. That is true. That is my battle. And we have to understand that there are certain forces that don't want people to fully understand where we are right now, what the stakes are that we face, not as a nation, but frankly, on the global scale. And at the same time, I do see those forces that have been manipulating this nation and the world, particularly after World War II, are being for the first time revealed in real time. And you're seeing the totalitarian aspects, you're seeing the financial aspects, you're seeing COVID was a huge disaster for this kind of empire above our nations, above sovereignty, that was put together after, I believe, in the fog of war and then after World War II, that we are just starting to reckon with exactly what we are dealing with and who and why the United States of America right now is under attack from all sides.
Absolutely. Could you unpack your distillation of these forces at play?
Sure. So I have a new book coming out, upcoming. I wrote a self-help book for American citizens called Americans Anonymous last year around this time. And this year I really dug into how we got here. And what I found was my book is called Infiltration Instead of Invasion, America Betrayed 1944 to 1954. And what I've come to understand is that the architecture that was, I believe, created in the last final years before the surrender of Hitler. And then, of course, the infrastructure that came up out of the ashes of World War II was purposely created to be supranational, to not have any nation state influence in the goings on of the multinational and corporations, and particularly the banking system that was created after and out of those ashes. And unfortunately, what I have found is I don't believe for sure that the American people have really gotten a full picture of what particularly the Dulles brothers and Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles and the people that they were working with in Switzerland to create this infrastructure that is somewhat functioning as an organism above all of our countries. That they set it up, I believe, by design to be exactly what it is right now, which is functioning above our nations. It has, like JFK said in that speech, infiltration instead of invasion. It is basically permeated and then infiltrated most of our institutions, certainly our government, but most of all, the CIA itself, I don't believe ever really was an agency that was working for the United States of America. I think that Dulles and his brother were both Wall Street bankers. They spent a lot of time in supposedly neutral Switzerland, setting up the entire infrastructure of the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, World Bank, the international organizations like the UN and the tentacles. They gave themselves all immunity. They started doing things that if the American people knew about, particularly with Operation Paperclip and much more than that, what they were doing in West Germany, then also the creation of NATO and all of this. I just feel that we've been largely deceived. And by the time Dulles, both Dulleses, John Foster was the Secretary of State of Eisenhower, and his brother obviously created the charter and everything for the CIA and became the head of the CIA. I think at that point on, the foreign policy, the State Department itself, and the CIA, along with USAID and other tentacles of them, they ended up, I believe, working for an international banking system, not for any nation, but to protect the infrastructure that they created in the shadows of World War II. That right now, we saw the coordination of COVID on a global stage, and at that point, if you couldn't see that there was clearly something going on above nation states that was usurping the sovereignty of all nations, then you weren't looking or unable to see that. And I think what we're watching now is the controlled demolition of that. And they don't want to give it up. I wouldn't either if I was them, and looting and lying to the world for decades. But war for profit is obviously what they're looking at now as they push us, or try to push us, into World War III. And it does appear that nation states, including our own, are awake and see that, and have had enough, and are starting to ask, all these decades of the UN, and then, of course, all the climate, and then all the, these Davos and Bilderberg and COP conference. Who are these people, and who gave them authority over nation states and sovereign nations? Well, nobody did. They just took it. And so for me right now, I'm just trying to unpack where we are, how we got here, and why Donald Trump seemed to have been the flame, or the match that lit the fuse to start to finally not only expose it, but I hope destroy it.
So now, as it relates to Trump, this is something I wanted to bring up at some point in time. You have on one side of the on one side of the aisle, you have proponents saying that, hey, Trump is not part of the globalists. He's for America. And on the other side, you have that, yeah, he's not part of the globalists, but he's part of another globalist faction, and so on and so forth. What is your take on that?
Oh, well, my thing first is, I don't think that, because I toured for 3.5 years with Cash Patel and General Flynn and Roger Stone and Nunez and a lot of people, and these are good people that love this country. So first and foremost, including Donald Trump and his family. But what I also think is that a lot of things were already done, particularly when it comes to the military industrial complex, DARPA, the CIA really funding all of the internet track and trace surveillance. A lot of things that were done in the name of security had nothing to do with security, like the unconstitutional Patriot Act. The lies that we were told about the creation of Facebook or Google or any of them, that they were really funded to be surveillance mechanisms by InQtel or the CIA, or I believe the CIA at this point and MI6 are the same exact thing. I think that they are international. They've been sold to us because we paid their bill. This year, of course, 2025, we have a CIA budget of $100 billion. And of course, that's always a black budget. Of course, we opened up the real money laundering operation known as USAID, which is not aid, it is international development, or as I call it, international capture. So to me, I think Donald Trump clearly understood that Barack Obama, in my opinion, was put in there to accelerate the pace to Agenda 2030, Agenda 21 before that. He was born and bred in CIA, in my opinion, operations, and his whole history was hidden from us. And I think that he saw by 2015 that maybe he was the only person who could afford to lose if he tried to open the eyes of the people of this country that our sovereignty had been usurped and taken. And once Barack Obama signed us on to Agenda 2030 in 2015, which of course is a nation state ending 17 sustainable development goals to full track and trace surveillance technocracy, I happen to believe that the global public infrastructure, the surveillance state globally, was already built. I don't think Donald Trump came in there and is signing things like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. No, no. The Patriot Act actually is a full track and trace surveillance system, originally, I believe, thought up by Rockefeller and the rest of the oligarchs that have run America since the Federal Reserve, if not before. But they tried to put that in Hillary Care. Then they tried to put that, it's the same thing, basically, the Patriot Act, a totally unconstitutional surveillance infrastructure and a intelligence agency that answers to nobody, also in an omnibus of Bill Clinton. And then they pushed it through, obviously, after the Project for a New American Century had their whole plan for full spectrum dominance. And then we get the Patriot Act, which basically usurped the Constitution in so many ways under the guise of safety, or protecting us from a war on terror that has still never been defined. And then we saw the war on terror get turned on we, the people of the United States. So, what I see when it comes to Trump is he's an 80-year-old man that doesn't want America's sovereignty or greatness or potential to be gone forever. And right now, I think he's dealing within a lot of things that were already created, particularly the decades of getting away with subverting the good of subverting the will of the people through NGOs and international organizations and all of this. I just believe that he's truly a nationalist, and of course during Nazi Germany, nationalism became like evil. It's not. It's just having pride in your own nation and wanting basically what I would hope is the George Washington farewell address to, somehow, some way still matter. And at this point, I don't know what Trump's, in his heart, but I do believe that he saw a great danger to the end of sovereignty, not just of our nation, but of nations worldwide, and saw that as a loss for not just the planet, but also inalienable rights and all these things that we value, individual liberty, really was on the line. So, what I think now is he's dealing with a beast that was created way before him. And to think that he is on any side that isn't pro saving the sovereignty and the history and everything of this nation doesn't really make sense or ring true to me. But I do see what people are saying, because how can you not? I'm not a huge fan of JD Vance. I know people love him, think he's great. To me, he kind of came out of nowhere and is a child of the tech oligarchs and Yale, which is not a great thing to me. But at the same time, I know what Barack Obama is and was. Firmly believe he was groomed and placed where he was. And frankly, I think Hillary Clinton and all of her friends were all in on it. And I, at this point, believe not only is it true, but I think Trump also knows this, that both Bushes, Clinton, Obama, and Biden are all of the same post World War II kind of, let's pretend that we still have a sovereign nation, wink, wink, but we actually know that the globalists, which they all are, run the world, and we'll just let the American people think that they are free while we capture their country. And I think Trump is still trying to free us from that post World War II capture and all of these, I believe, placed leaders we have dealt with over the last 60 years that all were complicit, I believe, in an ongoing coup and an ongoing deception of the people of the United States, to that our country is still the one that our founders left us, because it isn't. It can be, but I believe this is our last stand.
Absolutely. And to what end, you alluded to the globalists not wanting to understandably relinquish the control and the power that they have been able to accumulate. But so, to what end do you see them taking action to negate anything that compromises that?
Well, to me, what I really see is that I think World War III was planned at the end of World War II in a lot of ways. There's a document that is in my book that was released by the CIA, I think, in the late '60s, the Red House Papers. And if you look at that, what you see is that the pinnacle of everything is the international banking system that was set up out of the Bank of International Settlements, that is still opaque, that is still has immunities that are unacceptable. The Bank of International Settlements and 63 banks under them worldwide all have immunity. which should not be, and they're not allowed to be audited or investigated. Switzerland doesn't even have jurisdiction over the Bank of International Settlements. It is completely opaque, and frankly, it appears to me that the Dulles brothers and this McKittrick, a banker, American banker, were working with Schreff of the Reich Bank and Norman of the Bank of England in the latter days of World War II, creating the financial world order. That George H.W. Bush walked on the floor of the United Nations and announced we were going to have a new world order run by the United Nations, where I believe he left out financial world order, financial capture of all nations. And what I see happening now is kind of, revisiting like who created this: Kissinger, Brzezinski, the Crown, a lot of people surrounding them, these international Five Eyes alliance that doesn't make sense. NATO, which was largely, a whole bunch of Nazis from West Germany came in and then kind of created NATO. We had Operation Paperclip and the Frankfurt School, but then a lot more than that happened with infiltration of basically the children of the Bolsheviks, the children of the Nazis coming to America with new names and lives, but same ideology. And I think we're facing that now. Like in the 60s, the Weather Underground, I think, was the first color revolution. Tried to be a color revolution. It did okay, but it certainly infiltrated universities and took kind of like the whole hippie culture and all of that. Meanwhile, all basically funded and backed by the CIA. But I see where we are now, though, is that people are calling it out finally and saying, what is the CIA, and why do all these intelligence agencies seem to be above the law? And why, since the murder of JFK, has no one really been held accountable for anything? And then it turns out that the people that cover it up get promoted to president or the head of the FBI or, something else. So what I see right now is a mass awakening, not just here, but around the world, to the theft of the sovereignty of great nations, including our own. And because of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and our DNA and only being 250 years old, I feel that the United States of America is the last stand for sovereignty and freedom and individual liberty. And without World War III, they can't hold on to it. And that's why we have to be very cognizant that everything we've been told about Ukraine isn't true. They started building Ukraine out to be this, basically NATO, mass NATO project to try again for the third time to destroy Russia, divide it up around into Europe, which was the goal, obviously, of the Third Reich, and then basically run the world through Brussels and Geneva. And I see that the EU greatly overestimated their ability to continue down a path without, any teeth behind it. And there is a real shattering there. And honestly, the truth about the EU is the American citizens paid for it. With the fraudulent Marshall Plan and a lot of reconstruction after World War II. It was just the American people being looted and lied to. We created the euro, the CIA, and Kissinger recruited Klaus Schwab for the World Economic Forum. You can look into like the Club of Rome and limits of growth. So what I think we are at right now is a movement of individual citizens of the United States, seeing for the first time that America is not free and that we are captured and that we didn't agree to this. And the only way out of this is the American citizens, A, understanding that, and B, locally taking back their communities and their towns and their counties and their states, because whatever is going on in Washington, D.C. Is a very, very dark, deep sewer of just criminality for decades. And I really think the masses are awake, whether the media and their counterparts at MSNBC and CNN and the New York Times want to admit it or not. I feel that there's a real awakening in the American people, that we have lost our way, and it's not. And it's not going to last that much longer if we don't start taking back our country ourselves.
Yeah, I think we're fortunate that we have social media, albeit with its own challenges, to have discourse and to hear other points of view. Yeah. So as it relates to the globalists, would you define other factions just to kind of understand more of a macro level, or do you see them as kind of being the monolith?
No, no, I see that there are factions, but I think that the top of the spear of the factions are the City of London, the Bank of International Settlements, and the Swiss banking industry, and Wall Street. And then from there, I see the military industrial complex. It's like all the warnings of the past, be it George Washington, which had we only stuck with what George Washington said, I think that we wouldn't even be here, let alone the Federal Reserve wouldn't have happened. All these wars, we wouldn't have. A lot of people don't know the Civil War was basically France and the UK trying to break up America again, because I don't believe that the UK and the Crown ever accepted the American Revolution. And decades after that have been invested through these groups like Bilderberg, Davos, but also Council of Foreign Relations, Chatham House, all these Atlantic Council, all these different groups that have convinced us that somehow we are not separate. We are not an independent nation. We are somehow dependent and a part of Europe. We're not part of Europe, and that's not true. And right now, we are used, but also the military industrial complex is intricately involved in the international banking cartel. And to me, and then you can put the multinational corporations and the NGOs, and to me, that's really what we're dealing with here. And if you look at our universities for the last 20 years, um, what has been going on, particularly at Ivy League universities, and the next level there is, I think a pipeline into what George Soros calls civil society, which is the Open Society, or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller model, Rockefeller Ford, Carnegie Foundation, all of these. They have created, I think, out of the Ivy Leagues, a funnel into their organizations, an NGO, Ivy League school to NGO funnel. Well, that funnel is I think, purposefully and created to subvert the will of the actual people of the United States of America under whatever guise they call themselves, Democracy Alliance or States United or whatever. This whole 501c3, 501c4 kind of above us class that is all the same bankers and families that started basically the Federal Reserve funding them. Like there's 10 billionaires that essentially fund all of these NGOs that are right now, and have been since 2016 at least, running a color revolution in America to collapse us from within. And when I look at all of that, what I do know is that we've allowed it. We the people have allowed that. But I think that when I do it, and in my way that I try to explain it, I think we're talking about maybe 6,000 people in the United States of America that have decided that they are the elite, or as the Council of Foreign Relations would call them, the super class. I call them the parent company. And these are the people like Larry Fink and Eric Schmidt and Bill Gates and everyone that they call themselves the Good Club back in 2009. You got Soros in there, and a whole bunch of like billionaires that have captured the country. Somehow we allow our military industrial complex to also be traded on Wall Street. We are right now have most of our public pensions of the states going through BlackRock, while at the same time, the head of BlackRock is the head of the World Economic Forum pushing towards Agenda 2030. I mean, there's just so much right now that is so obviously clear of the usurpation and the capture of the United States of America by a supranational agenda, that many of our leaders have betrayed us. Frankly, at this point, I think every congressperson and senator back to at least 2020 should be full doged, audited, and find out, because between lobbying, NGOs, and frankly, the military industrial complex, this country is not functioning by the people, for the people, by design at all. And so to me, I just think we're at a reckoning point, and Trump is just the opportunity for the people to realize we have been divided and conquered on, psychological operation after terror event, after psychological operation, after wars, war after war for profit that you find out 60 years later it had nothing to do with what we were told. It's a very empowering time, I think, for the people of this country and free people all around the world. And at the same time, the zero sum game of Brzezinski and the grand chessboard of the world, or the project, the new American century of full spectrum military dominance by the United States, it's over. It's just, to me, that if the American people actually knew what you were in the military. I mean, if the American people actually knew that what Smedley Butler said after World War I was that all wars are bankers' wars for real, and that we have allowed our generation after generation to go fight wars that don't benefit anybody except for the same people over and over, as the same people are pushing towards World War III right now. I just feel like it's very, very clear that because of what our founders left us, that the American people are in a unique position to not only stand up for our sovereignty and our country and our liberty and freedom, but we are the last stand for it everywhere. And as I see right now on the bigger scale, I believe that it's countries that want to maintain their nation state sovereignty status versus those that have been captured by the global public private partnership. And the NATO nations and EU is obviously the most glaring one, but this is a world thing. And I really think that it is about collapsing nation states for the global governance model that these people have been pushing for. And that's why I hope everyone out there starts to realize that you do have power individually. You do have power. You can change things. Everything is local right now. The only way we save this country and our sovereignty is if people act locally and stop thinking it's somebody else's problem or somebody else's business. Because what I do know is happening right now, because I read their own documents, is the long term game of global governance is to capture the cities. So if they can put mayors and city council people in, and AGs and district attorneys like they're doing, that is the Kissinger basically model of regionalized government. Then nation states don't matter. Presidents and elections don't matter. Governors don't matter. And they are executing this in the West right now in real time. And we're watching like Mamdani and these people are normal. This is not. This is a long game plan to end national sovereignty. And like I've said the whole time, Donald Trump used to say, they're not after me, they're after you, and I'm in the way. Well, I've been saying for a very long time, they're not after America, they're after the world, and America is in the way. And that means us, we the people. And if we don't start acting like it, it'll be one swing of the pendulum, and these totalitarians that have captured all of the institutions will rise again, and that will be that. So whatever you think of Donald Trump and all these crazy factions on the right, which there is no left and right, it's manipulation. You will be letting down yourself, your family, your future, and all man. I mean, this is a struggle, I believe, for humanity. And a lot of people say good versus evil, and that's however you define it. But it really is about what is it to be human on planet Earth, and who are you, and do you matter? And I think we've spent a long time being told by the media and our own government, and certainly the intelligence community that manipulates it all, that we don't matter. And so I'm actually very sorry, because I'm working on this book, so I'm really into this right now. But I'm actually very optimistic about where we are, because a lot of the things that I've been talking about, they're starting to really show themselves. All you need is to see a little bit. And I think COVID was the great failure of the globalists, the greatest that they could have done as a favor to us, because as horrible as that was, as things come out, you realize the lockdowns were not based on science. Somebody, in my opinion, released that virus that wasn't deadly. We had all this stuff, and you can no longer really look at the last 6 years through the lens of anything prior. And so for me, I feel like we have a real shot here to not, and it's not really just about America and America's sovereignty, but to give humanity another shot at taking back this planet, because that is not who's running it right now. It is truly people that believe that human beings are the problem, as they said in Limits of Growth. And frankly, I think the opposite.
Boy, you unpacked quite a bit there, so I'm just kind of chewing on everything. How about regarding Agenda 2030? Do you feel, for those in the audience who are not familiar with your stance on it, do you feel they will be able to, they as in the globalists will be able to more or less effectuate that? And also, again, for those in the audience who are not familiar with it, could you briefly unpack what that entails?
Yeah. So it was first Agenda 21, but this actually goes back before that. This is a plan and a plot by the same people that I identify, which would be the international banking cartel, I call them. And those are the immune banks around the world under the BIS, the IMF, the World Bank. And then on the other side, the international organizations, the World Economic Forum, UN, World Health Organization, IPCC, and their tentacles, and their partners in the Rockefeller NGOs, which I call it the Rockefeller NGOs because it is certainly the Rockefeller model that all of these NGOs that have usurped the power of the people of nations are playing under. So Agenda 2030 is basically something that's presented by the United Nations and the World Economic Forum in a partnership of being 17 sustainable development goals known as SDGs. And frankly, without the will of, without the consent of the governed, or even explaining what it is, or any kind of, as we know, under Obama, a lot of things happened that were not really explained, and many things like the Smith Modernization Act and a whole bunch of other things that Obama was involved in. But particularly he, Samantha Power, a globalist and a regime change advocate, Susan Rice, another one, same thing, and all of the people surrounding him. We have to remember also Brzezinski wrote the playbook for technocracy, known as the technocratic state. He was partnered up with Kissinger, who claimed that he spent more time in with the Crown than he did in the United States, though him and Brzezinski essentially were running our foreign policy for decades. Well, their foreign policy was about a one world global technocracy, being technocracy meaning an efficient technology based control system on a global scale, running all natural resources, all financial transactions, all basically transportation, humanity, money, development, and that somehow the super class, as they were called by the Council of Foreign Relations, another Kissinger and Rockefeller project, a partner of Chatham House. Basically, it's a very similar model, if you ask me, to the Third Reich's plan, which was control of all, that was a unified Europe, but all natural resources, all humanity from birth to death, education, everything else in a full control grid. Well, what they've built for Agenda 2030 is the global public infrastructure. They started building it. I believe back in seriously like the late 90s, but I think it was planned out before that. Um, but what it is, honestly, is surveillance. It is surveillance, and the technology came up about it. If people don't know that InQtel is the hedge fund for the CIA, partnered up there with Stanford and other places. We also had Operation Paperclip, so we had all the scientists that came in that helped create the internet and the surveillance state that we live under now. So it is my belief that Agenda 2030 really is 17 sustainable development goals for this post World War II organism that is supranational, and it doesn't answer to anyone on planet Earth, not any election, not any president, not any flag, not any people. They are power for power's sake. They created the infrastructure, and they do not want that infrastructure to be seen. But now, because of the internet, we know about Davos and what they have to say there. We know about, the great COVID-19, the Great Reset being Klaus Schwab's book. We know about Event 201. We know about the simulations for the cyber polygon. We know that they have all these different plans for planet Earth that have not been talked about, voted on, or even considered by any people of any nation. So, Agenda 2030 is essentially, in my belief, a full track and trace surveillance system for the whole world to be run by technocracy of algorithms and technology on a global public infrastructure that's interoperable worldwide, ending all sovereignty of nations, including ours. And that is the end goal. And You can read all their fluffy language on the UN website. And what people need to know is there's an Agenda 2030 plan, not just at the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, but at the Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, the IMF. All of these international organizations have their own goals. NATO, which is not a defensive force in my mind at all. I believe that it is the international banking cartel and international organizations military. So, I mean, where we are right now is you can't not see it once you see it. And then when you read it, you think, oh, they want finally the UN after 75 years wants to end poverty for the planet. Oh, how do you do that? Well, you make sure everyone has a cell phone and a bank card and internet because that's going to end poverty. No, that's going to put everyone on a global public infrastructure with a social credit score because we have to be honest, the same tech companies that built what we are so horrified is in China are the same tech companies making deals with our country and the EU and everywhere else. They're all building it, whether it's Ellison and Musk and Larry Fink and all these same people that meet at Bilderberg. The end goal still is a global public infrastructure. And as I keep saying, I don't hear anyone talking about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or national sovereignty when it comes to cyberspace. And that is what Agenda 2030 is to me. And that is why we have to reject it and destroy it before the United States goes any further. Because what people don't know is Klaus Schwab said that Joe Biden was the biggest champion of Agenda 2030. And before Joe Biden dropped out, him and Kamala Harris put out a document that used to be on the White House website called Biden-Harris Global Goals for 2024 to 2028. And number one was to lead the world in achieving Agenda 2030 and then put $3 trillion of U.S. taxpayer money into making it work. And we dodged that bullet. So no matter what, Trump winning certainly stopped that train. But now it's up to us to locally and statewide be the watchdogs for this, because there is no one watching the very fast, particularly during COVID and after, building of the surveillance state at every turn. And, that is where I think our Constitution and Bill of Rights really has to become something that's not a piece of paper. The Fourth Amendment has completely been ripped up and a lot of other things. And that's because the people of this country either don't know, don't think it pertains to them yet, or they don't think they have any power. And the Agenda 2030 is totally antithetical to everything that the United States of America stands for and was created for, and our founders tried to give us as a constitutional republic. And again, all the same billionaires are behind it that were behind basically their families, the Federal Reserve, and then the whole infrastructure they built after World War II. And now the EU wants to go to war with Russia and pretends that it's Russia's fault. It's the same thing. So I believe that their goal was always to have a World War III, try to destroy Russia, do the Brzezinski thing, pull it into the European Union, and then hit Agenda 2030 as the solution to rebuilding the world after World War III, like they used the League of Nations and the United Nations. I think World War III's aftermath plan is Agenda 2030.
Do you see them being able to successfully execute some people say we're already in a WW3, but it's different types of warfare. But do you see it coming to a head in like a kinetic, a sort of a way?
I think the only way that happens at this point, I was very happy to see Donald Trump's, and I've been given a lot of information to these people. So I also think that the entire plan, if you look back, you will see that, I'm sure you know this, but maybe your audience doesn't. George Soros was already embedded and the Open Society and his weird Color Revolution University in the EU and all of that. He was fully embedded in Ukraine in the 90s. They started building Ukraine into a basically base, a military and intelligence and biological warfare base to destroy Russia, starting under Clinton, and the expansion of NATO. I firmly believe that these people that meet at these meetings desperately need a kinetic World War III again on the continent of Europe, which is why the EU should be dismantled, because they do not in any way respect the sovereignty of those nations or the people in those countries. I believe their whole goal is to have another mass destructive war on the soil of Europe, and then, as they did after World War I and World War II, come out with the solution. So problem, reaction, solution, and the solution is Agenda 2030, and it would be sold that way, and that is the only way that they would ever be able to implement that on planet Earth, is if they do it in a crisis, just like they got the Patriot Act passed right after 9/11. And it's not a surprise, because a lot of the same architects of the Project for a New American Century, unfortunately, many of them are dead and will never be held accountable. But they are the ones that I believe that created the where we are now. And when Donald Trump came in, we have to really, really understand, whether you like him or hate him, it was a global overthrow of the duly elected president of the United States of America in 2016, because they did not want him to get in the way, I believe, of the planned kinetic third war on Europe, on the European continent. And frankly, that was all lined up, in my opinion. And I think that the release of COVID it was an act of war as well. And Russiagate was not just about Donald Trump. It was about not allowing Donald Trump to have diplomacy with Europe, not allowing Donald Trump to have detente with Putin, not allowing Donald Trump to really know what was going on in Ukraine. As the president, he should have been able to call and say, my national security people are saying that, like, Biden's son, and there's all this weird stuff going on with Kolomoisky and Burisma and all that. He gets impeached for asking that. And if you go back, you're going to see, like, it appears that the whole time Trump was in office, the first term, Anthony Blinken was running a consulting firm that was continuing down the path of preparing for exactly what happened when Joe Biden got put back in, which was war on the continent of Europe, using Ukraine as their base. And they had this company, this consulting firm, West Exec Advisors. Well, I've done tons of research on it, and I'm telling you, national security people were in there, everything else, but they were still procuring weapons and stuff for Ukraine while Trump was being tied up in a phony, very phony, and they were in on it. I firmly believe that Bill Barr, Pompeo, Bolton, all these people knew exactly what they were doing, and they were not allowing Donald Trump to look under the hood of what they were cooking up for a third kinetic war over there, for profit, basically, and control. And to me, I feel like, regardless of what you think of Trump, I think that he is going to be the catalyst that stops a kinetic war on Europe. Europe cannot survive, and Russia has already won, and they're not telling them. So, at this point, I just really think that being honest about our history as people of this country and being okay. I always say our country's as sick as its secrets. Maybe it's time to start finding out why they murdered JFK, or why Eisenhower warned us about the military industrial complex and the relationship with international banks, or why endless war was set up both in Ukraine and Israel forever. It's just, there's so much. And then you have all the factions out there that are like, oh, it's the Jews, or oh, it's Africa. It's this. No, no, no. It's still the same thing it's always been, which is subverting humanity for the good of a few that think that they control everything. So, where we are right now is the American people have a tremendous amount of power, if they just realize they do, to actually stand for what our country was meant to be, which is a bulwark for freedom, liberty, and national sovereignty.
Absolutely. And how about perhaps some, in light of time, what are perhaps some other things that you feel are not receiving enough attention?
Well, I think first and foremost, the capture of the media in Hollywood is not really being understood. First of all, it's never been, entertainment. It's never been entertainment. But there is a really disturbing turn that took place. And again, this is because most of the people that run Hollywood not only are members of the World Economic Forum, the Council of Foreign Relations, and any number of NGOs and nonprofits and all of that, but the Operation Paperclip level of mind control, and then followed up by Colonel Aquino and Mind Wars, and then the evolution of drugging children very young. A lot of this stuff was a long game plan to um, make the lifeblood and the DNA that is the American citizen weak and unable to rise above, and dumbed us down and manipulated us. I think it's really important that we understand the correlation. I had on a survivor, two survivors of MK Ultra, good friends of mine, but one of them, this one survivor, Dr. Juliet Engel, she was in all the CIA LSD trials in Berkeley during the 60s, where, a lot of people know about Manson and all of that. They don't know that half the Nazis were there at the Jet Propulsion Lab, not half, but a lot of them, but also creating these drugs. LSD, basically at that time, the CIA was procuring it from Eli Lilly. Well, who ended up making Prozac? I mean, and I know it's hard for people to understand, but there is a very ugly situation between IG Farben and our pharmaceutical companies now, and it's not very different. And I really do think that the drugging of society isn't getting enough attention now that we've seen so much of this. When I was a kid, in whether it's vaccines, having 70 vaccines in a baby, or putting 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds on Prozac or Ritalin or Adderall. I believe that this is a long-term plan. If you look at some of the Rockefeller writings from a long time ago, or even Limits of Growth, which is a totally fraudulent book that blames humanity and human behavior for everything. I mean, I think we have to have a real reckoning of exactly how and why this happened, and where it came from, because I think it came from the psychological operations of our military intelligence, and that it goes back to brainwashing and mind control and manipulation. And then the other thing that bothers me while we're at it, I do not understand how the people of the United States of America are tolerating BlackRock and Vanguard owning the entire every corporation in this country, and then running every single basically state pension. We're talking trillions of U.S. taxpayer dollars through BlackRock to goals of Larry Fink that include ESG scores, Agenda 2030, all of these crazy things. The crazier part is the BlackRock and Vanguard also run the public pensions of the EU and of Mexico and of other countries and China and everywhere else. So it's like, in America, how come nobody's ever in the government ever said, BlackRock and Vanguard, what is going on? Why do they have the voting rights of every single corporation, including all of media, including, all of transportation, all of the food, everything? At the end of the day, you're going to put anything in, and you're going to find out that somehow this monolith, which is the monolith in America, I believe the parent company of the United States right now includes BlackRock and Vanguard, and they're not an American organization. They're not. They're a full-on globalist, global control, Agenda 2030 supporting organism that is taking U.S. taxpayer money out of our pensions, public pensions everywhere, and funneling it into the destruction of the United States of America as a sovereign nation that has a constitution and a Bill of Rights. So multiple things here. You don't have to go back to read even though you can, and you should. I would say right now, not only read the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, but the Declaration of Independence right now is pretty shocking. If you read it and you wonder, well, maybe we're free of the king, but somebody else is taken over. And then even better, the farewell address of George Washington was exactly what we should have done as a nation to remain a constitutional republic that was for the people and by the people. So for me, multiple things are being worked on. I do think, RFK Jr. is working on the drugging of society, and the drugging particularly of children very young before their brains develop. And then, what's happened with the entire craziness of this, of transgender children and surgeries. This is like it's so inverted from humanity. Like I keep saying, and Hollywood is the big player in this, and media, a lot of them members of the Council of Foreign Relations and Chatham House. But much of this, I believe, is about inverting the Ten Commandments with the seven deadly sins, like Alice Bailey and at the United Nations. They have Lucis Trust, really, Lucifer Publishing Company. And the world curriculum created way back when was also by a disciple of Alice Bailey and Blavatsky and all this crazy stuff that people don't know about. So for me, I really think the best case scenario would be for the United States to remove the United Nations and all of its tentacles and all of the immunities from the International Immunity Act of 1945 from the United States of America and start getting back to being a sovereign nation that is by the people and for the people. And if we can somehow rally ourselves to run for office locally and really speak out about things like the Democrat Socialist of America, which is a globally funded communist organization that is hell bent on destroying sovereign nations, and yet we're letting them run for office and take over New York. How does that happen? So it's all these little pieces. We're being hit by a lot of things, but I think that they are all becoming very clear. And then, as always, follow the money, and you're going to find 10 billionaires, including George Soros and a bunch of other people, Bill Gates and many other people that are banking on the collapse of the United States of America and the full control of Agenda 2030 because it benefits them and basically only them.
Yeah, I think that in addition to just becoming aware that that you have forces that are extrajudicial in nature. They are outside of the realm of being summoned by Congress. I mean, they're just they're transnational in nature, and that you have these and that at the top you have these. At least in my opinion, I'd love to hear your thoughts. My mental model of it, trying to make sense of it. That you have different factions. Some of them are working together. Some of them aren't, and some of these factions are engaged in occult like activities. And there is a lot of nefarious, drug trafficking, human trafficking, shadow banking. I mean, just a myriad of things that I think would really blow people's minds. And I think the Speaker of the House, he said something about something, he alluded to something about the Epstein file. If people were really aware, it would just create a complete schism in the public, relationship with government. And that is probably the most alarming to me, is that you have players and actors who are able to foment and put provocateurs in different areas, and they're able to effectuate their agenda, and they're not held accountable to anybody. That's pretty scary. That someone can just, yeah, let's whack this person, and and it's a Google show. We need the info right away on Mel. Give me every. I know, another
Yeah.
trying to put that
And
out there universe,
Google
but
is an operation. They run Google. Google is dangerous. So is Wikipedia. This is run by those people. And now the AI, and our children haven't been taught for, 20 years how to critically think or think for themselves, or that being an individual, ingenuity, all these great things that maybe we grew up being taught. They circumvented the schools of education at the universities long ago, and particularly Columbia and University of Chicago, which is, of course, the hub, Chicago, of all things Marxist and communist to take down America. But yeah, and I totally agree with you that it's to underestimate yourself, humanity, God, freedom, all these great things that we are expected to give up, and we're not really sure for whom. And something you just said is so important too, is that the Patriot Act created what I believe to be a fourth branch of government that has zero accountability. And I believe everyone in Congress and Senate are terrified of them. And I think that the remaining CIA heads that are still alive should all be being interrogated and finding out what they have been doing, how they have been doing it. Because frankly, the CIA head in London, Gina Haspel, and Brennan in America, and other ones. I remember Brennan was in Saudi Arabia for 12 years as the head of the CIA there. Then the only intelligence officer on that level that backed Barack Obama. Next thing you know, Barack Obama out of nowhere is president, coming out of the controlled demolition of and consolidation of the financial system. Nobody went to jail. Holder put in a memo so nobody went to jail, and nobody's gone to jail since for anything, including right now. and so and so, I mean, that's where the American people should all be on the same page. And this divide and conquer, black, white, gay, straight, this didn't happen. This was totally manipulated and manufactured to divide us so we don't see that America is no longer free, that we are fully captured by a supranational group. And I believe that our intelligence community that was created out of 9/11 works for them, does not work for the people of this country. And the great part is, because of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, think of it what you will, people that are willing to fight, like you and me, can make a difference and can turn the tide. It's just people have to stop being afraid. And the one thing I think people are most afraid of is our own intelligence community, and particularly what the FBI did under Comey and Wray. Has been the worst. What happened with January 6th and the January 6th people is the most egregious, disgusting, and I hope the truth comes out. It is going way too slow. And right now, I firmly believe that the most brave warrior we have in all of DC at this moment is actually Tulsi Gabbard, because for the first time in history, at least since the unconstitutional Patriot Act was somehow passed, she's actually looking into the silos that have allowed this intelligence community to run without oversight, without any being accountable to anyone. I think that's the scariest part. And like I've been saying, every single senator and congressperson should be Doge audited back to January 1st of 2020 forward, because be it through the COVID operation, the George Floyd Black Lives Matter operation, the Ukraine impeachment, Ukraine operation, Ukraine everything, Ukraine war, Ukraine money, and the 2020 election, probably every single person in there is guilty of criminality that's beyond the scope. And frankly, it appears to me that since JFK's murder, they actually pick people to put into office that are compromised. And when you brought up Epstein before, I think the biggest thing, because I've been covering it since 2008, and nothing is new that's come out. But what I will tell you, I believe Jeffrey Epstein was a not just the biggest, child sex trafficker, and not just teenagers, but I think he was also a military weapons person. I think I know he was involved in Iran Contra and other things. But if you look at his four main friends that he went around the world with, you see Khashoggi from Saudi Arabia, Ehud Barak from Israel, and Andrew from the UK. These are all weapons people. These are all military industrial complex. And when I say I don't think the military industrial complex and Wall Street are two different things, particularly after World War II. And I think he's probably, they want to say, oh, he worked for Mossad, he worked for CIA, he worked for, basically, he worked for everyone, because what he was doing, I believe, was the highest level of weapons trafficking and all kinds of things like that. Created the Clinton Global Initiative. Nobody should forget the Clintons have gotten away with more than anything. That she was in Doha this week should make everyone sick. While she was the Secretary of State, and all that stuff with Benghazi and everything else, the Clinton Foundation and Clinton Global Initiative, which were both started with Jeffrey Epstein, made billions and billions of dollars in donations while she was the sitting Secretary of State, and she is still free. And there are things like this that we have to understand. The American people have allowed this to continue since the murder of the president in 1963. No one that has committed the crimes against the American people has been held accountable. And frankly, if Trump and not a huge fan of Pam Bondi because of many things, but if Trump and the rest of them do not hold some people accountable for the egregious, I believe, grand conspiracy, but also, look, Trump's not the victim here. The United States of America and we, the people, are. And it doesn't matter if you like Trump or Obama or Biden or anyone else. The people of this country have been deceived, betrayed, looted, lied to endlessly. And it's time for us to start uniting and realizing the government is the problem. you know?
Oh, I completely agree with you, and I know we're wrapping up here before long. I was just going to make the comment that when I think about the last century, how many people perished because of the bureaucracy failing on so many levels. And I think of I was just reading about World War II not too long ago. World War One, you have Mao's and Pol Pot, and so I just I question when people talk about big government, and I just think it's a fool's errand. And So with that being said, would love to, if you want to touch on your book a bit, and as well as how can people learn more about you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of editing my book, so this is all like top of mind. You can find me. I have a daily show every day at Rumble, and it also airs on X live from noon to 1:30 Eastern every single day. I have also, I was banned for life from YouTube, but apparently I started over, yeah, and with me and Dr. Zelenko back during the early COVID. So I just started a new channel there at the Real Mel K Show. There's a lot of fake ones, but we're just gonna see what happens over there. You can find me at X at Mel K Show. You can find me at Instagram, The Mel K Show, and especially my website, themelkshow.com. I have a free resource page. So if anything I am talking about is new to you, there is certainly a free primer over there. There's opposition playbooks. There's a lot about what happened to our education system. A lot of the WikiLeaks drops are there. D-class from CIA, FBI. Be your own hero. Be your own educator. We have all been betrayed and lied to and looted. It's time for us to start being our own hero. And that means educating yourself and empowering yourself. And that's what the Mel K Show is about. So go check out the melkshow.com resource page and get started doing what you can do where you are.
Love it. Well, Mel, I appreciate you coming on. It's been great to have you, and yeah, hope to have you on in the near future. Quick ask: over half of you who watch the show regularly haven't yet subscribed. If you've enjoyed the show, you're finding value in it, subscribing is really the best way to support the channel. It's of course free. It literally takes 2 seconds, and it lets the algorithm know that this content matters. And of course, my commitment to you is going to be that I'm going to continue to bring on great guests, refine those questions. And of course, I'm always receptive to your feedback. If there's certain people that you'd like to have on, or certain questions, or this, that, and the other that you'd like to have as part of the show going forward, things of that nature, please let me know. I'm pretty easy to access. Anyhow, that's my commitment to you. If you can subscribe, that would mean a lot. Thanks.